which is laid down, and for our survival on a daily note is precisely this working memory being in place. So I hope you people might have heard about Rajan Mahadev and Suresh Kumar Sharma, who Suresh Kumar Sharma is probably Guinness record holder, who can remember up to 70,000 digits without without any kind of what do you say, mistakes in it. And Rajan Mahadev is again another person who can remember, who made a history by remembering up to 31,000 pi notes. So they were able to do that precisely because of their working memory being very strong. And when I say this, it is very important for you as parents to know that this working memory, 63 to 70% of children with autism are found to be having an impairment. And that is the precise reason why their language acquisition is delayed, or their organizational skills are delayed, or in terms of their problem solving, or in terms of their decision making, or in terms of doing multitasking is grossly affected in these children. So before going on to the topic in itself, I would like to have one volunteer. Can anybody volunteer? This is a very small things which I would ask for you to repeat so that it becomes easier for everybody to understand. So can I have any volunteer, please?
Yes, sir. I will.
Thank you so much. Yeah, well, can you please repeat this number back of me? 919-771-6084.
919-771-6084.
Precisely. Thank you so much. And just be there, ma'am, like that. And see, this is what your short-term memory is about. You know, recalling the same number and reproducing the same number, retrieving the same number from your brain is called short-term memory. Ma'am, the same number, can you give me from last, count it from back to front, and give me the fourth number from back?
I'm sorry, I didn't remember.
So that is what is your working memory.
Yeah.
That means your ability to manipulate the numbers, or the ability to manipulate the alphabets, or ability to manipulate the information what you receive is precisely about it is precisely about your working memory. I hope you got the difference between short-term memory. It refers to short-term storage of information, whereas working memory allows for the manipulation of stored information and remembering what you are supposed to say when your turn comes. So that is the definition of working memory for you. Now, when you, I hope, Saujanya ma'am, my screen is good?
Yes, sir. It's clear.
Visible?
No, it's very clear. I can see it.
Fantastic.
Want to zoom in a bit?
Okay. So if you really look into the picture over here, you first have to receive certain kind of stimuli, right? The number which I told, first, the listener was able to take it through our auditory processing, which is a sensory memory, and capacity of your sensory memory is 3 to 7 units for that particular period, and duration is about 3 seconds where you can keep it inside. Okay, and this sensory memory can be easily forgotten after this particular period of time. That's where precisely the ma'am who has come and gave us that number could not take it forward towards that working memory model. And this sensory memory will alert attention in a human being, and then it stimulates the working memory part of it. Now, what you need to understand here is we receive information through our senses, right? Whether it is touch, whether it is hearing, or whether it is vision, we receive memory from different senses, but the major part of memory is laid by with your vision or with your auditory part of it, which is called iconic memory and echoic memory, right? So the information what you receive through your vision, the information what you receive through your vision and the memory which is laid through your vision sense is just half a second to second. But whereas when you talk about your echoic, when you talk about your auditory sensory memory, that is for few seconds. Now, do I have to approve this?
Sir, I'll take care of that.
Okay. That's how, see, the receiving information from different senses or sensory modalities and its interaction is one component of this. And this means that the information from one modality can influence the information processing in another modalities. So when all these modalities come together and form a unification as a single entity, then the information goes into this working memory component of it. And our ability to attend to one task using many senses is possible only because of our working memory, because working memory helps us to pay attention, remain focused. Working memory helps us to pay attention and remain focused. It helps us to helps us in organizing tasks, and it helps us in regulating our emotions. These are very important components. Please understand it very clearly. So working memory will help you to pay attention, organize tasks, regulate emotions, and it helps us to remember, learn, and retain information. It helps us to remember, it helps us to learn, and it helps us to retain the information. And it is important for it becomes more important when you are trying to perform complex cognitive tasks, such as reasoning, comprehension, and learning. Reasoning, comprehension, and learning. And these three requires a higher cognitive level of functioning. And if a child has to do an executive functioning level of tasks, so in terms of their ability to reason or their ability to comprehend or their ability to learn things the way it should be, if your working memory is in place, then only these things will take place in the kid. See, most of the times we find our children not able to reason out, not able to do multitasking, or they might be specifically really good at certain things. As I said, the person whom I have mentioned, this Rajan Mahadev, he is a person who had got this capability to remember 30 different pi scores, but he could not remember when they produced him with certain syllables in grammar, that comma, intonation, and all that marks. He could not remember more than 6. And his capability to remember the 30 was because he kept on practicing doing that. That's the reason why he could lay down. So our children sometimes are found to be really extra intelligent and more than what you expect, like especially when it comes to a world map, and you ask them, I've seen children, who can name the country and the capitals of each country. And I've seen children who, when played a music for a 40 minutes length, and if that music is in different language to what they speak also, they were able to retrieve that complete 40 minutes of songs without any mistakes to that. So this working memory, when you work with a child properly, they will develop this working memory. And once the working memory develops, that will help them to reason out, that will help them to comprehend, and that will help them to learn. And this particular model, what is there on the screen, is actually been presented by Badley and Hitch. They are the people who established this working model. And what they say is that growth of working memory capacity is a major driving force of cognitive development. It's a major driving force for cognitive development. So what it implies to you, that if working memory is not in place, then cognitive development is not taking place in your child. And if you don't work on this, it will not allow the child to develop reasoning skills later in their life. It will not allow them to develop reasoning skills later in their life. And I really don't know how many of your speech therapists or your ABA or your occupational therapists really emphasize and focus on improving this component, because it is an interrelated stuff. As you can see in the picture, it clearly gives you certain terms, right? It clearly gives you certain terms in uh, 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 I think I missed out those. I didn't take those things. There is in this. If you first look at it, there is a sensory memory, right? After sensory memory, your working memory model comes in, and your working memory model is again divided into two components. One is phonological loop. They call it as phonological loop, and another component is visual spatial loop. So when you talk about phonological loop, it is all about the speech therapy component of it, and there is a specific way they need to work on that, developing that phonological loop, so that their working memory establishes, thereby child's language skills or production of sounds or ability to manipulate information which is received through auditory processing, and their ability to express it will become easier. And if you, as I said, the another one is visuospatial sketchpad, which means that visuospatial sketchpad is being dealt by an occupational therapist, where whatever information what they perceive through their eyes and the spatial relationship of that particular thing needs to be taken care by them. But what we really see is we see therapists working in terms of making child produce sounds, making them sit in front of them and produce sounds, but it will not come unless and until this working memory is not been worked on your kid. So this is very important. Why I'm saying this is, please, whenever you get this opportunity to go and whenever you see your therapist, ask them what is the status of working memory of your child. And this particular model, this particular working memory model, probably when you hit working memory model in Google, you will get all these pictures, and whatever I'm trying to put across, you can figure all those pictures out. So it is a multi-component system. It has got different components attached to this, and there are four major things which you need to remember in this. Please pen it down. Four major things which you need to remember in this, or just give me a second. Probably I'll probably pull out that particular picture for you. So Saujanya, I will not be able to go out of this.
I'll not be able to move to that slide, sir, because I don't have it with me on my device. You'll have to go to that particular slide number.
No, I don't have that slides. I need to pull it up from Google. Yeah. Anyways, just whenever you find time, please look into that pictorial description of working memory. And there are four components, as I said. The first component, they call it as central executive component. They call it as central executive component. Second is phonological loop. Please pen it down, because these terms are very important for you, so that you can really ask your therapist to keep working on them or to focus on them to improve child's ability to improve their working memory. And as I said, central executive system. Second one is phonological loop. Third one is visuospatial sketchpad. Visuospatial sketchpad. Fourth one is episodic buffer. Episodic buffer. I'll explain all these terms for you, but please take a note of these four things: central executive, phonological loop, visuospatial sketchpad, and episodic buffer. So these are the four things which are part of this working memory, and which helps working memory to get established, so that child's cognitive development takes place the way it should be. See, central executive is nothing but it functions as a control center for complete working memory. It functions as a control center. It acts more like a system which controls attentional processes. So what does it mean? It helps us to remain focused. It helps us to remain attentive to the task what we are supposed to do. It allows working memory system to selectively attend to some stimuli and ignore others. What it means, like let's say when you are driving a car and you suddenly receive a phone. So sometimes you neglect it, right? You won't even look at the phone if, let's say, you're driving a car and there is a bicycle in front of you and your phone is ringing. So we won't shift our attention from the road and pick up the phone, right? That we are able to do only because of our working memory being in place, because it helps us to attend to some stimuli and ignore other stimuli. And if this is not in place, imagine the child now. Most of our children can be easily distracted, right? The reason behind they are easily distracted is this particular central executive system in working memory is not in place for them. It's simple. Like, you know, if I have to put it in different words, let's say a boss of a company has to take certain decision which deserves attention immediately, right? So this decision what is going to take selectively, for that decision to be taken, he requires information from different people, right? So he'll take this information from these different people and then he eliminates whatever he has to ignore and he'll selectively attend to certain things in that, and then only he'll be able to problem solve that particular situation, or he'll be able to make some decision for that particular problem which arises. And if the children are not attentive, so imagine this particular central executive system is all haphazard. It's not in place. So if it is not in place, that means they are not able to take the proper decision, or they are not able to do a proper problem solving. So am I going fast, or is it okay, Sojanya?
It's fine, sir. It's fine.
So this working memory model, as I said, has got 4 components. That is central executive, and that has got a phonological loop, that has got visual spatial sketchpad, and it has got episodic buffer. As I said, the central executive system will lie in the top, and the 3 things which will support this central executive system is your phonological loop, your visual spatial sketchpad, and your episodic buffer. As I said, like if a boss has to take a decision, he requires information from other employees in the company so that he will be able to problem solve the situation, right? So this central executive system has got 2 assistants. The 2 assistants are, one is phonological loop and the second one is about visual spatial sketchpad. Okay, so this will help a human being to precisely get involved in goal-directed behaviors. Our ability to involve in goal-directed behaviors is because the central executive system is there in place. Why? Because it allows 4 important functions. 1, our capacity to focus attention and our capacity to have a selective attention towards things, number 1. And number 2, our capacity to divide attention between 2 tasks. Divide attention between two tasks. Like if I have to again give an example, maybe while cooking, if you get a phone, you will be attending to the phone and you will be cooking, right? So that is happening because your working memory is in place. So capacity to divide attention between 2 tasks and capacity to switch attention from one task to another task. Our capacity to switch attention from one task to another task depending on the priorities again. And it will provide link between working memory and whatever this memory which is stored in working memory to get it stored into long-term memory, so that as and when required to retrieve, your long-term memory will help giving it back to your working memory. So this is overall, if you really look at it, it will help a human being to manipulate, to recall, and to process information, whether it is verbal or non-verbal, for meaningful functions such as decision making, problem solving, and writing skills in a child. So if you really look at it, it is an attention supervising system that decides what we pay attention to and how you organize a sequence of operations that we need to do an action. That means your ability to remain attentive, what you need to attend, and your actions which are determined, and the actions which you are delivering all depends upon your working memory, or all depends upon this central executive system. Now let us look into phonological loop. When you really talk about phonological loop, this particular system handles two things. One is auditory and verbal information that allows us to manage and retain spoken and written material in our memory. I'll repeat it. Phonological loop is the one, the system. It is the system which handles auditory and verbal information and allows us to manage and retain spoken and written material in our memory. So can you understand the complete receptive and expressive language component and production of information from our child? Like probably you would have taught him a lot of things today, and their ability to retrieve it the next day is all lost because this particular phonological loop is not very strongly established in our kids, because we never focus on developing this phonological loop in our children, but we straight away start working upon developing their expressive language. So if you're working on developing their expressive language without your phonological loop not being in place, that means your central executive system is not in place. That means your child is not being attentive to register or to retain the information what you are teaching him. That's the reason why there is a delayed language development in children with autism. And this particular phonological loop has got two components. One, its ability to store information, and another one, they call it as probably you can pen down these terms also. Phonological loop has got two components. One is the storage component and another one is articulatory control. Storage component, and the second one is articulatory component. Storage component is nothing but where we briefly hold information in short-term memory, but articulatory component, in other words, they call it as rehearsal, which means it is a mechanism we maintain and strengthen our memory. Like the more you rehearse, the memory becomes more stronger. So if you really look into the picture which is there on the top, if it is only in the storage, the capacity is 7 to 9 chunks and duration is only for 5 to 15 seconds. And without, in the brackets it's written, without rehearsal, that information is forgotten. So, but with the rehearsal, that will maintain and elaborate the information which is processed. So rehearsal is a very strong component which we forget. We go to therapists, we give therapists for 40 minutes and we think that that is enough and that is done. And rest of the day, again the next day is a new beginning for the child. Unless and until you don't rehearse, the storage capability of information received through ears is not more than 5 to 15 seconds unless and until you don't rehearse it. If you rehearse it, then it is maintained and then it will strengthen the working memory component of your child. Research suggests that information held in the loop only lasts for 2 seconds. Please think about it. Information received through this loop will last only 2 seconds unless it is processed via rehearsal. So if you don't rehearse it, whatever you are teaching your child, they will immediately tend to forget. Now, if you really look into, how should I put this? Okay. Yeah. If you really look into it, let's say you have applied for certain banking, you're purchasing something. Let's say you're purchasing something, and once you give your bank details, immediately you will get an OTP, right? Immediately you will get that one-time password. As soon as that one-time password comes, you will start repeating that number, right? you'll start repeating that number so that you won't forget it. Because if you look at it and read it, then your capability to store it is not beyond 2 seconds. That's the reason why you rehearse it until you enter that number. At least you would have I do it. I don't know how many of you do it, but I definitely do it. As soon as I get a OTP, I'll be repeating that number louder, or repeating that number inside myself, so until I enter it onto the thing where I'm purchasing. So that is the importance of rehearsal, so that the storage component can remain for a longer duration of time in the working memory component, so that child can retrieve that information. So this storage component acts as an inner ear for your ability to remember speech sounds. Your ability to remember speech sounds is the storage capability, which is considered as inner ear. But whereas this rehearsal component is considered as inner voice, where you are able to perceive the information, you're able to retrieve that information. You are able to retrieve that information. That's why it's called inner voice. Storage is called inner ear, whereas your articulatory rehearsal is called as inner voice, because that's where the importance for reading and comprehension takes place. Importance of reading and comprehension takes place because of this inner ear and inner voice capability. And this phonological loop is considered as language learning device for human beings. It is considered as language learning device for human beings. So that much important it is when you talk about phonological loop. Now, when you really look at it, there is certain tricky things in this phonological loop. What are those tricky things? Like, they call it as phonological similarity, because this is very important for you to understand, because it establishes a kind of treatment program, what you need to be designing for your child. What you need to understand here is list of words that sound similar are more difficult to remember than words that sound different. List of words that sound similar or more difficult to remember. Number one, ability to reproduce a sequence of short words is more in comparison to ability to remember sequence of bigger words, like, probably cap, tap, mat, these kind of things you may be easily able to remember it. But when it comes to dictionary, university, bigger words, hippopotamus, things like that in a sequence, it becomes difficult. So ability to remember short words in a sequence is better than ability to remember long words in sequence. And they say letters also, the sound production, letters that are similar in sound are harder to remember than letters which are not similar in sound. What it means, whenever you are working with a child, always start working with letters which does not sound similar. Always teach them smaller words, so that their memory increases in terms of sequencing, and always use sounds which doesn't sound similar. Always use words which doesn't sound similar. That means not those kind of rhyming words. Okay, so this is very important for you to understand. And the another component which plays a vital role in when you're working on this phonological loop is attention. And attention, why I'm saying attention is music. They have done research has been done where they do this. They have made children to sit with a child without having any kind of auditory interferences coming in, and a child with a headset phones of only instrumental music, and a child with a headsets with music with lyrics. Okay, and the performance of all these three children varied. The child who had no interference, his ability to perform was 70% more than a child who was hearing to instrumental music. And the child who was listening to music with lyrics was found to be 60% lesser than the other kids in his ability to reproduce what is being told to them, or reproduce what is being taught to them. So music and the sound interference plays quite a vital role in terms of developing this phonological loop in a child. So it is that is one of the precise reason many of the speech therapists who have got real good ability to work with children, they don't allow parents also inside that room unless and until child develops certain sounds, because there will be a lot of interference of noise from the parental side of it, or person sitting along with the child inside that room. So as long the efficiency automatically reduces there. So that is one of the reason why they do it. So because the ability of your phonological loop to become stronger, to develop the way it should be, is always determined by the kind of environment or kind of sounds which are there around the child. So if your child is non-verbal, and if you are trying to work on developing their phonological loop so that they can develop these sounds and production of or the language learning starts taking place, the room needs to be without any kind of auditory interferences. Okay, now let us see visual sketchpad. So you understood that the phonological loop is the one which helps us to develop the language. Now let's see visual spatial sketchpad, which is nothing but it's about visual and space. It's about vision and space. It's responsible for handling, managing, and retaining visual and spatial information. In other words, information about space, information about objects and their visual characteristics and how to navigate is what is taken care by this particular component of it. So if you really look at your child, this is what they miss out. What if you really give them say about a triangle or different shapes in their hands and ask them to explain them in relationship to where they are being kept, or explain them to ask them to explain the characteristics of that particular object which is there in front of them, they will not be able to do it, because this particular thing will help us how things look and allows us to manipulate images in our mind. It allows us to manipulate images in mind. For example, like, when you if you give an apple, to your a picture of apple to your child, the rotational pictures what we give, and we ask child to match the picture to the correct one, which is which you rotate and keep, right? There are certain games which we play with children in that fashion. So they are precisely to develop this visual spatial relationship in them, because that will help us to know how things look, and from different angles. How things look from different angles is what this helps. When we give directions, let's say when we give directions to a friend to help them navigate through city, we tell them, right, you go straight and you take right and you move forward in the straight direction. Then you start imagining the route itself, right? You start navigating through it. So that's what it does. And if you have to probably say, draw a flower now, think about drawing a flower. So I don't think so we'll be able to depict the flower immediately, but by the process you finish drawing this flower, you might have really imagined that picture in your visual brain, visual memory, and thought about it 4 or 5 times before you finish the flower, right? So that is what this visual spatial sketchpad will help in. So this also, I hope most of you would have played this game called Tetris, right? Tetris in the mobile phone. That is all about that picture will be dropped, that bars will be dropping down, and you need to reorganize, rotate them, and keep them in place, right? So those are the games, those are the things that Tetris you are able to play, because your spatial relationships, visual spatial relationships are established. That's the reason why you are able to play. And just try that particular thing with your kid and see whether they will be able to do it or not. The best way to analyze and to understand, okay, whether your kid's visual spatial sketchpad is in place or not. Okay, so likewise, like phonological loop, how it has got 2 components like storage and rehearsal, this particular visual spatial component also has got 2 components attached to it. One is called as visual cache, CACHE, visual cache, and another one is inner scribe. The second one is inner scribe. Inner scribe is nothing but like a rehearsal only. Visual cache is about, it gives information about the form, the color, and other aspects of visual identity. So if your child is not able to tell you the form of the object in front of them, or the color of it, or other aspects which are related to visual identity, the characteristic features of that object in front of them, then this visual cache is not in place. And inner scribe, this gives you information about how that particular object is located in terms with space. That means spatial location and the movement representation. How is it going? And their ability to plan. So these are the certain things. These are the certain things which Visual Spatial Sketchpad will help you in. I'll just again gist it to you. Visual Spatial Sketchpad is nothing but it helps us. It gives us information about space, object, and visual characteristics, and helps us how to navigate through things. And it has got two components. One is visual cache and another one is inner scribe. Visual cache is the one which helps you to determine the form, the color, and other visual identity aspects of the object in front of them. And inner scribe is the one which gives you information about the spatial relationship and movement information, as well as the planning. Now, the interesting component. Many parents come to me with children having concerns in terms of overeating, right? Maybe some of your kids might be also having that problem, like, they're craving for certain foodie stuffs. They're craving for food stuff, and there was a research done by Kempa in 2005 to determine that usually what parents and what we usually do is that either we use flooding. We tell to flood the child with that particular kind of sweet, which is always craving for. Give him as many as possible at one shot, flood him so that he becomes saturated, and he will not be requiring. Or you will say, use it in a slowly phased out manner. Systematic desensitization is the other one which we use. Apart from these two things, what we do is we avoid using things at home, right? We don't keep those kind of things. Like, let's say a child likes a cupcake, or child likes ice cream. His craving is more for that. So we avoid buying ice creams at home, right? But that is a very wrong way. And the reason for food craving can also be because of this visual spatial relationship. Because they have done this experiment on a set of 750 kids whenever they were hungry, and they have taken children who are not hungry, and they've kept this food which they crave for in front of them, immaterial of whether they were hungry or not hungry, because of the visual spatial presentation of that particular food stuff in front of them. Children who were hungry also ate, and children who were not hungry also ate. And they have taken brain mapping studies for that to determine how it is getting located and whether the implication is same or not. And most of the food, this was done in US, so most of the food which they really had craving, they figured out was pasta, chocolate, ice cream, and pizzas. Whether the child is hungry or not hungry also, this particular component of visual spatial sketchpad not being in place, they become craving for that particular kind of food. So whenever your child is craving for food, it is not always necessary that it should be a sensory component, or or he has not developed interoception. It could be because this working memory and visual spatial sketchpad also not being in place. This can happen. Okay, so if you really retrospect yourself in terms of what kind of cravings your child is having for the food, you will be able to really understand. That particular thing in a different way altogether. Okay. So whenever you are working with a child, if you are really providing your child only the visual field and activities to stimulate the visual object or teaching him the visual object, that means you are actually developing their left hemisphere of the brain more stronger. But when you're working on spatial information, when you're working on spatial relationships and spatial information, that means you're working on right hemisphere. So what does it mean? Whenever you're working with a child on visuospatial relationships, that means you're working on the whole of the brain together. You're not precisely focusing on working on one particular hemisphere, but you are improving the ability of the overall brain to develop their cognitive skills. Okay, so that is the importance of visual sketchpad for you. And as I said, the third component which comes is episodic buffer. The third component is episodic buffer. Episodic buffer is nothing but it is the one which helps this phonological loop and visual spatial spatial sketchpad to integrate together, and it will send that information to the brain. That means, like, sometimes see, why do we remember our household family members' phone numbers, and why we don't remember other members, other family members' numbers is, see, when you write something, when you read it louder, then that auditory visual together will become stronger component to develop memory than through only one system, right? So that's the reason why most of the times people use visual auditory aids, so that it becomes more easier to understand, more easier to remember, and the memory which is laid through that is much stronger than only through one system. So this episodic buffer is nothing but it integrates this phonological loop and visual spatial relationship together for the central executive system to function the way it is, for your working memory to develop the way it is. So it is so important that working memory and these terms what I've mentioned. So what you need to understand, working memory, first thing, your sensory memory needs to be strong so that your working memory develops the way it should be. And if working memory has to develop, then your central executive functioning system, that means your ability to attend, your ability to attend selectively, divide your attention or shift your attention between tasks, our ability to plan and organize will all take place at the central executive system. And then comes, that is being supported by your phonological loop and your visual sketchpad, which is being integrated together with your episodic buffer. And phonological loop has got two components, one storage component, another one is rehearsal component. Storage component is the one which enables the child to remember the sounds, and rehearsal component is the one which will enable them to strengthen, to remember what they have learned. And when you talk about visual spatial sketchpad, it is all about visual cache, which will help the child to remember the form, remember the color, remember the visual characteristics of the picture. And it has got rehearsal again in it, and this rehearsal, otherwise called as inner scribe, this rehearsal will help them to identify the spatial relationship, movement, and ability to plan things accordingly. So this is what working memory is for you. This is how working memory takes place. So I hope you understood, like, in a gist, if I have to give an example and tell you, let us take a carpenter who is utilizing a workbench with the different kinds of tools when he has to, assemble something. So the tools which he is going to use, he'll keep changing the tools which he uses as his workbench and places those tools. He'll keep taking one after the other, and he'll keep on assembling. But this workbench is not just specific to keep these tools there forever, but they keep changing, right? They keep changing and they keep getting added. That means It is not just that workbench is not just keeping materials in one place. It's a workspace that carpenter uses it to combine different materials to create new products, right? Every time they have to do something, they have to use different materials to get a new product. So similarly, working memory is not just simply a storage component of things, but it enables us to generate new thoughts and change your thoughts, combine your thoughts, and search for new thoughts and apply different rules and strategies to them so that their ability to function in a daily life becomes easier. Okay, so in just that is what your working memory is for you. And when you're talking about testing this working memory, how do you test? There are three different tests which are specific, and these three different tests are Saujanya, can we move down?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sir, can you hear me?
I'm not really able to go down also, Saujanya. Somebody else has taken annotated. Can we?
Sir, can you hear me?
I can hear you, ma'am.
Yes, sir. Please continue because looks like there's some technical glitch here.
Yeah. Yeah, there is no, because I had those tests in the next pages. Anyways,
Yeah, you can go ahead, sir. You can
no,
show the slide.
I'm not able to maneuver the page here.
Okay, one second. You are now host, sir. You
Yes,
can.
I'm now able to, ma'am. Yeah. Thank you. So this is the test. It is called as NBAC test. Is it visible? It's called as NBAC test, one of the major tests, and not just the test. This is how you train a child with developing this working memory tool. So NBAC is not just a test, but it is a tool which enables a person to improvise on their working memory. It's nothing but you give a sequence of number to a child and you ask them precisely, like, what was the fifth number back, n back. So the n can change, n can vary to make the test harder, since the subject needs to remember at least that much answer to say it correct, to answer correctly. Like, that's the reason in the beginning when I asked, I have given a 10-digit number to ma'am and just asked, can you give me four numbers back? That's how you test this particular thing. And another one which they usually, how you usually assess this is also, here is the other way. Like, a color you have taken for blue, a different color, you will give this page to child and you will ask children to focus on it for some time, and you will ask them which color black was in or which color white was in. That's another mode of training, using this particular thing and keep training through and back. And another one is calculation test. Calculation test is nothing but, again, you give, what do you say, different numbers. Let's say you give 6, 7, 8 for a child, and you tell them to add 2 to each number and see whether their ability to add it or not. Or you'll give them a set of different numbers, like 19, 20, 30, 42, something like that, and ask them to double the number. So that is called a calculation test. And other one is that rotational test. I don't think so. I have here to show that. Another one is the rotational test, where like a game like Tetris. As I said, that a game like Tetris is what I usually use it. And usually, at Kites we have got our own protocol of taking this particular developing working memory properly in a child. And the protocol what we do is about first getting them assessed for the health of the ear, and to see that reducing child is not having any hearing difficulties, and protecting from interfering sounds. This is the first step which we look into it. And prior to working on all these things, we give activities to improve attention first. Once that our attention component, the sensory memory, is been in place and child is able to pay attention, then the first thing is go and look for parallelly you need to look for health of the ear, reducing hearing difficulties and the protection from interfering sounds. That's the first step. And then we start working upon discrimination of sounds. Auditory discrimination of sounds is the first thing. Then goes with the auditory discrimination of words. And once child develops 50 to 100 words, then we move on to teaching them rhyming words. Then comes auditory sequencing, and then we help them to auditorily rehearse doing the same things. And then we start teaching them different categories, grouping and organizational categories, the different categories of what we teach according to the age level. That's what we start training them with, the categories. So every child requires and needs to be assessed in these areas, and then you can start developing, or you can start working on them in the right direction. So Saujanya, I'm done. So if you have any questions, I'm ready to take.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. And also, I have shared the working memory model, the images in across all Mitra groups for parents.
Fantastic.
So, anyone has any questions related to this topic? Please go ahead and ask. We probably might be able to take 5 of them. Yeah.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, hi.
Hello, sir. Thank you very much for all these informative webinars. Sir, my son has lot of ice cream craving. Whenever I take it to somebody's house also, first thing he do is he will open the freezer box.
Yeah.
So I just want to know how can I help him?
Yeah, well, see, you need to get him evaluated to see in the visual sketch pad whether he is having concerns with his inner scribe, or whether he is having concerns with visual cache. If he is having concerns with visual cache, that means the form and the color of it, then you need to be working in that direction, or the visual things, because they precisely certain times used yoked prisms to help them to overcome this. And they usually use, many of the times, prism therapy is what they called. Yoke prisms and ambient prisms is what they usually use to get over that.
Okay. So can it be done online? Can you help us with
It can be.
I stay in Bangalore, so I just wanted to. Okay,
It
sir.
can
Thank
be.
you very much, sir. Thank
Yeah,
you, sir.
Hello, sir. Move on to the next question. Next parent, please.
Yes. Thank you so much for today's webinar, sir. My son is 7 years old, but he has very good, excellent memory, I can say. Like he falls under Asperger's. But the thing, while you were mentioning in the webinar, he's having difficulty in spatial relationship. So how to develop the right hemisphere of the brain, sir?
See, that's where the role of this N-test, and that's where the role of the program, different rotational pictures, the visual perceptual skill formats, what you find of matching objects and matching you will keep that three-pointed cubes in one place, and you ask child to you will keep the three-pointer cubes in different positions in the next page, and you will ask child to match it. So that kind of rotational pictures is what will help your kid.
Thank you, sir.
Question.
Hello, sir. Can I Can I ask, ma'am?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, sir, my son is 12 years old. He's very good with numbers. So when I ask questions like, what is the last five? So say if I give a 5-digit number, 8-digit number, and I ask him what are the last 4 digits, what is the third digit, what is the 7 digit, he can recollect immediately and he's saying it very well. But then when I read a story, he doesn't remember the characters or the story sequence. Uh, it looks like a working memory. So can you, what do you think, sir? Is it the same
100% it
issue?
is a working memory. A child who has been specifically talented in certain areas, they are called we call it as seventh capabilities. And the seventh capabilities, as I said, this Rajan Mahadev or this Suresh Kumar, whoever their ability to remember the 70,000 digits was precisely due to their seventh capabilities, and the emphasis being laid more on. See, what usually happens is most of the time, we think that our kid is really good with numbers and we focus more on teaching them only that. And that will precisely enable, because you are rehearsing it more, that will precisely enable their capability to excel in that particular area. But as you said, probably you would have left out working on his phonological loop. So that's where probably the concerns might be for him. And if you have to really work on developing, first you need to approach your speech therapist to help you out in developing this phonological loop in your child first, and thereby their ability thereby their ability to develop these two components of storage as well as their ability to develop this articulatory control will help developing this comprehension of words. And whenever they are working with words, always please remember, as I said, you should be using sounds which are not similar and words which are shorter than larger words, and your ability to make them understand the production of similarly producing sounds and not similarly producing sounds. So sounds is one, words is one, and their ability to sequence is one. So they need to be you probably have to start working with him in that fashion so that he develops it. See, because you need to understand that unless and until a proper discrimination of sounds is not established in them, they will not be able to go to the discrimination of words. And unless and until they are not able to discriminate 50 to 100 words, their ability to have auditory memory, auditory sequencing will all be disturbed in them. So that's the sequence which you need to be establishing to work with your child.
Sir, one more question on that. About words. So the questions that I give, there shouldn't be any pattern. Is it because he's good at remembering patterns and he's able to recollect when it is words? Should I do like that?
Yes.
Is it?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Next question.
So my daughter is 2.5 years old, and she just has some 30-40 words, which mostly is she uses for labeling. She doesn't communicate verbally at all. Now, all the speech therapists whom we have spoken to, no one has ever spoken about this working memory or phonological loop. So who are the right professionals if we want to take this approach, even if not here, like we are in UK right now, but is there some could you signpost us?
It's a combination of your sensory integration therapist with your speech therapist.
Okay, so
Combination of both.
Yeah, I mean, our current ones, I don't think they are at all. We'll check again with them, but they are not working on in this direction. Is there any lead wherein like we can some place for signposting where we can even do it online or remotely?
They will provide my number in the group later. You can contact me personally on that.
All right, thank you, sir.
Because UK doesn't have, the NHS system doesn't really has gone so far in getting these things done the way it should be.
Yeah, even the private therapists, they are not working on this line at all.
Yeah. Any more questions?
Yeah, I think the questions are pretty much done, sir, for today's topic. And if you have any further questions later on, then we'll take up in the upcoming webinars. We definitely would like to know the feedbacks, what you understood, what were the core topics that you wanted to know, so that we can take it up at some other time in as a webinar in the coming days. Sir, thank you so much. It's a very important topic, and thank you so much for giving a lot of information to many parents here in the group. Thank you for your time, sir.
Last one thing which I wanted to close on is, Saujanya, that to all the parents, that please understand, unless and until you don't establish working memory in your kid, they will not be able to problem solve and decision make. And it is not at all difficult to work on developing working memory in your child. All that it requires is rehearsing. All that it requires is rehearsing to take it to the next level. So that means if your kid is not having it, don't be whatever we have discussed now. If your child is not having it, don't be disappointed. But the better component of it is why these people who have got this Guinness records and all could do it. They could do it only because they could rehearse. So if they can develop it, anybody can develop it, because these guys did not get it through their genetics. It came because they practiced it. So if you practice it the right way, your kids will definitely develop this particular component of it. Thank you so much, Saujanya. And those